Hi, my name is Victoria Ray Henderson. I'm the host of the NABA podcast, Listen Up Homebuyers. And I'm really happy to have with me today Glenn Grutta. He is a Massachusetts licensed home inspector for the last 25 years and the owner of Vector Home Inspection. He started working in residential, commercial, and industrial construction with his father in the 1960s. He has a background in building and remodeling homes. And welcome, Glenn Grutta.
Well, thank you very much, Victoria. Happy to be here.
So glad to have you. Now, it sounds like your experience in construction, your background in technical knowledge and in electrical and mechanical engineering, you're really well prepared to be a home inspector.
What's interesting is that when I started working with my dad, I was about 7 years old,
Oh,
and neither one of us realized what I was going to end up doing. And my whole life has been in construction. So yeah, it's been a wonderful process learning about homes and being able to do these inspections for people.
so can you kind of touch on some of the home buying issues that most home buyers wouldn't think of during the home buying process, regarding that home inspection?
Sure. What's kind of interesting, and just to get started, I'm going to give you, home inspection is in its basic terms. The home inspection is to tell the home buyer the condition of the components on that day. Pretty basic. Well, over the years, inspections and inspectors have developed into much more, which is good for the client, the purchaser. They get a lot more knowledge and experience from these home inspectors. Um, now we tell those major components where they're located, how they function, how those components work together, maintenance tips, suggestions on upkeep of your most prized possession. So those are things, we've sort of expanded our expertise not only on the homes themselves, but on how we present and teach people about their house. And that's really key because it's amazing that a lot of people are not familiar with home ownership and what goes into it.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
so yeah,
I like hearing that you say you teach people because all inspectors are not created equal, and for the entire home buying process, everything is the buyer's choice. We do recommend home inspectors for our clients, and we do think that we choose some of the best ones in the Washington D.C. Baltimore area. But some people choose their own home inspectors. Talk to me a little bit about how home inspectors might not be exactly the same, or not providing the same services.
well, first off, as far as our clients are concerned, they have to be realistic in their expectations when we inspect a home.
Hmm.
Uh, there's no perfect houses, and there's always going to be a list of things. Uh, the inspector is there not only to tell the client the the bad and the ugly, but also the good. And
Hmm.
that's where we've morphed into being a more positive experience for those home buyers. But honestly, we're their reality check. There's no
Hmm.
perfect houses. There's no perfect people. In fact, the only thing perfect in this whole world is my wife.
Oh boy, that's a good answer. Good comment. um,
Um, so yeah,
yeah.
when it comes to inspectors, no, they're not all equal.
Mhm.
Um, years ago, like I started 25 years ago before there was even licensing,
Oh
and
wow.
they just handed me my license, which was fine. But today you got to go to school, and there's a lot of protocols that are required. Um, but even when you have buyers brokers that have a good fleet or a good group of inspectors and people
Hmm.
they work with that they're really confident with, I think you're in a better position to do that because you are working for the buyer, and
Correct. Right.
obviously the inspector is part of your team.
Right.
Uh, uh, so uh, even when homeowners don't want to use a recommended inspector, they really should do their due diligence
Yeah.
and interview the inspector. Uh, do a phone interview.
And
Look
ask them
online.
ask them what when you
Well,
if you don't know anything about home inspections, what would be the questions to ask?
okay. Number one, how long have you been an inspector?
Good one.
Number two, what's your background? What's your experience? What kind of report do you give?
Hmm.
You'd be surprised how sometimes some of the home inspectors don't let you follow them around. You
Oh,
know,
wow. That
it's
huge
tough.
red flag.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
you want to find those things out. What kind of inspector are you hiring?
Hmm.
Um, you know, Personally, despite decades of construction experience, it took me 4 years as a home inspector to really know what I was doing, to be comfortable with what I was doing.
Right.
Home
Right.
inspectors, home inspectors have to deconstruct the house mentally in their head.
Hmm.
You can be the greatest builder in the world, but now all of a sudden you have a built house and you're trying to figure out what's going on here. So you're using visual clues to
Hmm.
determine cause and effect. And it's almost like being Sherlock Holmes in a way.
Yeah, it is.
So
You're
it's a whole
right.
different ball game. Uh, that's one of the things I like about it.
Hmm.
But yeah, they have to realize that they want to have someone that they're going to be comfortable with.
Yeah. And I always, encourage our clients, our buyer clients, to ask a lot of questions. There are no stupid questions. And, I tend to
Exactly.
hang back and I learn something in every single home inspection. I've been on hundreds of them, always something new to learn. Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is interesting because even at my experience, there's always something for me to learn too.
Yeah.
I'm constantly seeing things that I've never seen before and learning, and we do continuing education, but it's a fun aspect of my particular profession.
Right. Now, who should buyers bring along to the home inspection? Is it a family affair or is it just you
That's a great
laugh?
question. That's a great question because, you know, ideally, just the people buying the house and the buyer's broker. Okay, that's your
Hmm.
team. That's
Hmm.
you should want my undivided attention, and I want your undivided attention.
Right.
Uh, I've done inspections with 20 people entourages. It's mayhem. You get nothing accomplished,
I
right?
bet.
Uh, and the other thing is don't bring cousin Eddie, the family contractor. A couple things happen when you bring him.
Yeah.
Number one, you're going to follow him around.
Right.
But guess what? You're paying me.
Right.
So you
Right.
should be following me around.
Right.
Um, Number two, we have a set series of events. We have a way that we do the inspections. We have to know how things work together. Cousin Eddie might be an expert in whatever, but we have to be experts in everything and how they work together.
Right.
And that's important. It's not just one component that may have a problem, may be causing another problem in another part of the house.
Yeah.
Um,
Give me an example of that so that people can
okay,
really understand what you mean.
I'll give you an example of a situation that could be a problem. I run into this in new construction, where you'll have a water heater in the basement in a
Hmm.
utility area.
Hmm.
It has what's called an atmospheric vent that's open on the top, and it just
Hmm.
uses pressure differentials to draft the
Okay.
exhaust gases. Right next to it, you're going to have a furnace, an air-based heating system
Hmm.
that has air pressure differentials, and it's got return vents. And very often, the return vent has a big opening right by the water heater where the filter would go. Well, guess what? You're creating negative air pressure in that area. You could backdraft that water heater.
Wow.
Now, you could have the installations perfectly approved by the mechanical inspector and a plumbing inspector, but guess what? You get a carbon monoxide issue.
Wow.
So those are how things work together that you really have to show and be concerned about.
Yeah. And you found that in new construction?
I found that in new construction.
Yeah.
I have found in new construction where I have failed the electrical for one simple reason. You can't find the electrical box because the contractor buried it behind a wall in the basement.
Good grief.
And then I get asked, well, how's that possible? And I give examples all the time about stuff like that. And I said, well, as far as that particular situation was concerned, without ever being in the house, I knew what happened. You have a building card, a permit that you have on
Sure.
the house,
Yeah.
and the building inspector doesn't inspect everyone else's work.
Hmm.
He inspects to make sure that the other contractor inspectors, the other, mechanical, the
Hmm.
plumbing inspectors, the
Hmm.
electrical inspectors have
That,
signed off.
that
He
they've
doesn't
signed.
check their
Right.
work. He
Right.
just sees if they signed off.
Hmm.
Well, in between them signing off and him coming to sign off on everything else, they
Hmm.
finished the basement.
And
Well, they
those are
didn't
the
leave an
subcon.
access.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So yeah, and that's
Yeah.
and you would never think that you would need an inspector for new construction. Well, some of the worst issues I've seen is in new construction.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one time, new construction, brand new HVAC system. It was in the middle of winter, and I guess some subcontractors had come in, and when they were putting in the drywall, they ran that HVAC system. So our home inspector popped the panel off the front and caked in like cement was
Right.
drywall mud.
Yep.
It was crazy. So had they not had that home inspector go through with that new construction, that would have never been found.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And even in new construction, when we actually do a code inspection, which we would normally do,
Mhm.
there's issues. There always is. So yeah,
Yeah.
and I think hiring an inspector is a small price to pay for whatever you're going to spend on that house.
Oh, I agree. Could
Yeah.
you, since you mentioned it, could you quickly touch on code and give everybody the the final word on what that means? Because I hear a lot of buyers tossing it around. Tell me what it is.
Okay, so we have specific rules and regulations on how to build a house. Okay, the code is for houses built today.
Mhm.
You can't apply codes to houses built 5, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. In Massachusetts, we have hundreds of years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do too.
So yeah. So yeah, the only time I'll do a code inspection is on a brand. Now, when I get asked about code inspections on pre-owned older homes,
Right.
I'll tell people I can't do a code inspection, but what I'm going to do for you is a common sense inspection. I'm going to recommend code upgrades because the codes are always changing. So for safety items, the outlets in the kitchens and bathrooms
Right.
and things like that,
Exactly.
certain railing heights and
Mhm.
all those things that could be safety oriented, I'll bring to their attention, say, this is a recommended upgrade by me, but I
Right.
can't write that it's a code violation because it's not.
Right. Because the house was built in
It would,
1902 or
exactly.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you recommend that buyers come to the home inspection with their list of questions and concerns? I mean, if they're first time home buyers, they're kind of coming in green, like, what is this almost? But
Right.
what is your recommendation on that?
Okay, I think they should make a list of questions and concerns, and I think they become more of the process.
Hmm.
Okay, they
Hmm.
want to engage the inspector, not go in there deer in the headlights, not knowing what's going on. Have an expectation.
Hmm.
Work with the home inspector because you'll actually remember more in that process
Right.
by actually being there.
Yeah.
Chances are the inspector is going to answer all your questions before you ask them anyway. But
Mhm.
it's a good way to get involved and to get more comfortable because it's a stressful thing for buyers.
Mhm. It is. When you go through and provide them with information about the house, do you also, as you're doing that in real time, kind of give it a grade of on a scale of 1 to 10? This is a 10 in terms of how bad it is, or something to worry about, or hey, this isn't a big deal, or how do you do that? Because a lot of them
Okay.
freak out with all that
Well,
information.
yeah, they do freak out with the information, but one of the things you can't do, at least in Massachusetts, I can't give you an opinion as to what I think is going
Hmm.
on. And
Hmm.
the way the inspection process is supposed to, in ideal situation, I just give you the condition of the components. You make the decision. I can't sway you one way or the other.
Hmm.
Okay.
So you
And
say,
well, yeah, we do rate things as we go along. I mean, our
right.
inspection report rates things. And I do make sure people are aware of the severity of those situations.
Okay, that's it. Right.
And that's important because you're right.
Yeah.
People need to have a comfort level one
Hmm.
way or the other as to whether or not to proceed.
Hmm.
So I make sure my clients, and you really have to read your clients very well because
Hmm.
some of them are, no matter what you say, are going to be completely freaked out.
Hmm.
And then you have other people that, okay, you tell them the house is falling down. Okay, fine. Can I fix it? Well, yeah, you can. So yeah, it's a way. Presentation's important and
Right.
explaining things. But I will never let a home buyer leave without being 100% comfortable with the information and knowing just what severities there are.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good. Um, and then most of the time in the Washington D.C. and Baltimore area, we are in that house with our client. Again, we are exclusive buyer agents and brokers, and then it's just us and the home inspectors. And I just tag along, and I don't take notes. I listen, and I let that relationship develop. Is that the way it is in the Boston area?
Well, in the Boston area, it's a little bit different. Right now, about 50% of the time, maybe a little bit less because of the obvious situation
Yeah, the
with,
COVID. Yeah.
with the COVID stuff. But a lot of times selling brokers are there and they can get in the way. I
You
mean,
mean the
it's
listing agents, the people who are
the
selling the
selling,
house?
yeah, the listing agents will
Wow.
actually try to get in there and at times actually defend some of the things that I bring up. They shouldn't even be following us around.
They
It's not the
should
inspection for
not.
them, right? So
No.
yeah, they'll follow us around sometimes. Most of the time not. Most of them are good, but you always run into these few that, want to run the show. And
Golly.
I'll bring up a point of issue with some component, and the first thing they always say is, well, these people have been living here for 50 years and they've never had a problem. And then everyone looks at me. So what do I say? I go, that only doesn't make it right. It makes them lucky. That's it. It's still wrong. It's not safe to live here. You really got to sometimes let them know that maybe you
Yeah.
should just go sit down somewhere and
Right,
relax,
right,
because this is not going to go
right.
well for you.
Turn off that selling machine piece of your
Exactly. Yeah.
brain. Oh my
Right.
goodness.
And then the other thing that happens with selling brokers sometimes.
Listing
So you,
brokers, they're
uh,
called actually.
oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's
Okay,
okay.
listening.
It's
I'm
just a
sorry.
language thing. No
Yeah,
problem.
listing brokers
Yeah.
is that. Oh, the homeowner wants to sell these pieces of furniture, so they start getting involved in a conversation about buying furniture and stuff
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
measuring rooms, and that's not what we're there for. So yeah, it can be frustrating.
Yeah.
Uh, but we work through it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because yeah, I've been in that exact situation as well, where maybe a homeowner will come home and have some beautiful piece of furniture, and then all of a sudden the focus is on this antique furniture. Meanwhile, the home inspector's over here crawling
Right.
around in the kitchen, looking under the sink, and I'm like, hey, you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
so funny. Oh my goodness. Are there ever issues, again, because you're in a very different area than I am. Are there ever issues that you come up against, like getting access to things? I mean, around the DC, Washington, DC and Baltimore area, they're supposed to have the electric on, the water on, and if it isn't on, we go back and check those things. So how is it again where you're doing home inspections?
Okay. So when it comes to utilities, 99.9% of the time they're all on.
Good.
The only time you run into an issue is with a bank-owned property,
Mm,
where it may be winter, like this time of the year would be winterized,
right.
and somebody wants to buy one of those situations. And then when I get the phone call, the first thing I say to them is, you better call the bank and make sure it's de-winterized, because I can't check anything other than the structure and the roof.
Right.
Because if the electrical's off, I don't care if there's a brand new
Yeah.
heating system there, it doesn't
Right.
run.
Right.
So that's usually not an issue,
Hmm.
um, as far as that goes. Uh,
Hmm.
Getting access to those major components, yeah, that can be an issue. The longer people live in a house, the more stuff they have. The
Yeah.
more stuff they have, the more they pile it in front of all those major components. The
Right.
water meter, the shutoff valve, the heating system, the electrical box. And I'll turn around, talk to my client, and say, "Well, guess what? The only time you have to get to these items is an emergency. So don't do what they're doing here." Uh,
Hmm.
and then, even getting into the attic, you get into the
Yeah.
attic that's got an access panel in a closet. Well, we're not
Yes.
movers. I'm not going to start touching everyone's stuff to get out of
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
Massachusetts, it's the buyer who's responsible for getting the access, which is ludicrous, right?
Yeah.
So my
Right.
recommendation always is to have your buyer's agent
Right.
talk to the listing agent
Right.
about having access for the inspection.
Yeah. That's critical. Right. I am so glad that we could have you give us an overview of the home inspection process. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but and I want to have you back so we can kind of dive in a little bit more on some other topics. But Glenn Grutta, the owner of Vector Home Inspection in Massachusetts, thank you so much for joining me on Listen Up Home Buyers.
Well, I thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. And I do look forward to doing this again. It's an important aspect of
Yeah.
what we do for our clients.
Yeah. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.